Welcome to Solutions with Courtney Anderson. I am your host, Courtney Anderson. Today's show is one that's part of our Joyful Art of Business series. And that, of course, is where we talk about all of the full expression of who we are as individuals, focusing on, of course, how are we going to surpass our goals? But when we look at our practice of business, this practice of a joyful art of business, what we're talking about there is that business is anything that we do that's an endeavor. It doesn't have to be for pay. It could be volunteer. It doesn't have to be anything that is full-time or part-time or anything of the above. It just means that we're doing something that's an endeavor, and that when we're doing something, in addition to whether or not we feel like we have to do it, or we feel like we should do it, or if we use it because we make money or because it meets some other goal in our lives, that we should still have a return on our investment, an ROI, in regards to our emotional, our psychological result, our outcome. How do we feel? And that's what we're talking about here. So it's a huge area, but it allows us to talk about all of this other part of our lives. It's not just sort of a content-based issue of a certain type of business concept or legal concept or human resources. It's dealing with sort of the whole person, who we are as people, and the idea that when we're doing something with our lives, we should have a return on that investment that's positive. And so I tend to just use the concept of joy because we're trying to reorient ourselves to the way we invest our limited time to the best of our knowledge in our lives in the form that we are now as people. And this is a challenging topic, today's show. The show is, our episode today is, how am I supposed to be joyful when horrible things keep happening? How am I supposed to be joyful when horrible things keep happening? And this is a difficult topic sometimes for people to feel comfortable with. I think sometimes when we delve into the area of the entire person, a holistic approach to our lives, and we start to talk about getting a return on our investment in our professional endeavors that I just have labeled joyful, and meaning it's some sort of positive, emotional or psychological result. Sometimes the feedback and the response I receive is a little bit cynical. Sometimes people will say to me, "Oh, I'm supposed to be joyful about work, about my life, really? And all these horrible things that keep happening to me, I don't even want to listen to this, garbage about I'm supposed to, focus on feeling good when I'm barely making it through each day. Life is an arduous, difficult process, and I'm just trying to, stay alive." And when I get some of that type of feedback that's a bit negative, I understand exactly where it comes from. And in fact, one of the things when I started in the speaking, corporate education, and corporate training field, which is now going on close to 15 years, it seemed like an odd business arena for me to move into. And I came most directly from, I'd been a professor and taught at a large, wonderful school that I had attended, University of Texas at Austin. I taught in their business school, and then I'd opened my law firm, and so I'd been practicing law. And that's not typically a field that you go into focusing on the joy every day, because you are inundated with nothing but people's problems. People don't usually call lawyers because they're super awesome and happy. They call a lawyer because there's a problem, and the problem is usually so big or so serious to them that they're willing to spend money, and a lot of money, for somebody else to step in and take up their cause. And so you're just dealing with usually really, really emotionally draining challenges, right? Somebody's getting divorced, somebody's family's broken up, somebody's died, and you're trying to determine who gets what property. Someone's been fired, someone's about to be fired, someone's facing financial ruin for themselves and or their business. They need to file bankruptcy. Someone believes that there's someone out there that's violating their rights. They want to hire you to investigate, and if if it's true, they want to sue or to do whatever they can legally to stop the person from doing whatever it is that's violating their rights, or somebody's been accused of violating the rules of society, and they're facing criminal charges. All of these are really serious. And so part of it that seemed a little unusual when I went into the speaking and corporate education field, and when I added sort of motivational and personal empowerment topics and subjects, people who knew me sort of thought it was an odd fit because I come from a very substantive background in terms of the work I did. I mean, it was based on very concrete concepts in terms of, here's a statute, or here's a law, and here's the outcome, and there wasn't a lot of engagement in things that you couldn't easily measure or that hadn't easily been predefined by either a legislature or some other entity or body. So when you start moving into this idea of feelings, do I feel joyful? What does that mean? Really, seriously. And a lot of what I do in all my programs is I try to make things really simple. There are people who are much more knowledgeable and subject matter experts in almost all of these arenas that will be able to provide resources to delve into, what is joy? What does that mean? How is it expressed? How is the body computing sort of things in terms of the chemistry that's involved and release of endorphins and other things that make someone feel something that we tend to label, happy or positive or elated. There's just so much science behind all of the things that we talk about. And in our world, and what I'm trying to do is just sort of lay out framework. It's all about framework to begin the process of each individual then moving further into detail and the substance of what they need individually. But the big picture is that if you're just doing things because you have to and you're not happy, it takes a toll. And so it could be just it takes a toll in stress, it takes a toll in your life and how you treat other people. And one of the things that motivated me originally when I started to move away from practicing law full-time and transition into practicing law part-time and doing corporate education and then keynote speaking and motivational speaking was I knew a lot of people who were very successful. They were successful on paper, meaning that they have a fantastic education, they have a wonderful income relative to the average income that a person would have, and in many instances they had prestigious job titles, and I just knew too many people that had all of that and were not happy, and in fact in some instances were downright miserable. And although it sounded odd to me at first to sort of recalibrate my business and add this other area in terms of education, corporate training, not in a university, but sort of out in a seminar or for a client. And then as I moved into motivational empowerment programs, I thought there's something to this though, because if you focus just on the business part, just on the sort of either academic or experience part and income, and you get all of those things, there were just way too many anecdotal experiences I had of people who were just miserable. And it seemed to me, well, then what was the point? And that's a lot of why I am a huge believer in the program. And I also have had my own personal journey in life where things have, in many ways, like most of us, I've had things that have been just good fortune, just luck. I was born, with pretty good health. That's just kind of luck. So there are people out there that are born and maybe they're having a sensory an issue, maybe with vision or with hearing. Some people have motor control issues. Some people may have body parts that don't function as sort of the standard is expected, and so that they didn't do anything at all. It's just sort of born. And so I was really fortunate. I've got 2 legs and 2 arms and 2 hands and 2 feet, and with the few exceptions of just some issues that impact me a little bit, I in terms of like my knees and things of that. But I'm breathing and I'm walking and I'm mobile, and all of that's just random luck. I didn't have anything to do with it. I just sort of came into the world like that, and I'm never unappreciative of it. one of the things that when we're moving through this topic of how am I supposed to be joyful when these horrible things keep happening, is part of it is how do you define joyful, how do you define horrible thing, and then what kind of tally are you running? And typically when I work with people, especially if I do like a one-on-one corporate education or corporate consulting, corporate mentoring program, and I get really angry people, they just focus on all the horrible things. And I am not one at all to disagree that there are sometimes an insurmountable amount of horrible things that happen. And I'm one of these people sometimes I sat the other night and I was watching a news show about a conflict or a war in part of the world, and I'm one of these people who watch something like that and just break out in tears, because it's sometimes it feels like how can one person absorb so much pain? There's so much pain in the world, and there's never just one war or conflict. And the more you sort of dig into current events or pay attention into what's going on around you outside your geographic area, and then even in your geographic area. One of the things as a lawyer that was insightful is lawyers get to deal with people when they have really bad problems, but you get to see sort of what's behind the door or the facade that a lot of people in your neighborhood and my neighborhood hide behind. There are people that you work with every day. There are people that you live near that you would never guess what really goes on in their lives behind their door, behind the facade of a polite wave. As a lawyer, you get to see behind that pretend veneer that everything's okay, and often it's overwhelming. Just as much as I'm overwhelmed by some news report of maybe a civil conflict or a war, I've been overwhelmed and just completely at a loss emotionally to deal with people who look seemingly normal, who live near you, who live near me, but I'm their lawyer, so I have to listen to the fact that, somebody that looks normal and maybe even has some kind of outwardly, seemingly successful life has awful, horrible things that are happening. Sometimes there's child abuse, sometimes there's elder abuse, there's all kinds of emotional abuse and neglect that people inflict on other people. There's never a lack of new ways for people to hurt other people. And every single time in life that I thought I've heard it all, or I've seen it all, or I've had something, especially a work experience where I have to be closer to it. One thing to watch a media report or read about something, it's another thing to be sitting in a room with somebody and you have to work with them or try to fix it, right? How do I fix a situation, that somebody is hurting another person? And it's overwhelming. There's just so much in the world that's horrible and awful. And part of what I think I tried to do earlier in life is I just tried to numb myself and not feel a lot. So a lot of people, I still talk to people who will say, well, I don't read or watch news. That way I don't see it. Okay. All right. Out of sight, out of mind, I guess, maybe. I don't think necessarily you should try to think you can read everything and see everything, because no one is able to absorb everything. But I think complete ignorance as a goal toward joyfulness is probably not necessarily the best path. Because my argument is it's not just out there or somewhere else in the world. It's right there, right here next to you. I guarantee you. It's in your community. It's in your neighborhood. It's in your building. It's on your block. It's in your office. If you knew what goes on in the lives of the people you just encounter every day, it would cause you immense distress and pain. There's just a lot out in the world that's just not good. Horrible. So when you ask the question, how are you supposed to be joyful when these horrible things keep happening, if all we do is look at the horrible things, and I'm an advocate of exposure, education, being out in the world. So I'm not an advocate of just put your head in the sand like an ostrich and, I don't read it, I don't see it, maybe I'm not aware of it. I don't think that's helpful, and I don't think it gives you and I a well-rounded exposure to the world. On the other hand, I think if we only focus on the horrible things, then we could spend every waking moment just doing that. There's not an end to it. And there are things that are happening now. There are things that are potentially setting up future horrible things that are happening today. Maybe we could, try to stop all of those things. There's things that happen to people. There are things that happen to other species on the planet. There are things that happen to the planet itself. There's just an incredible list of horrible things that exist that probably will exist in the future if nobody, changes something that's happening right now. And then there's the historical record of the horrible things that have happened that a lot of us get stuck in. Some of us get stuck in it as a society or collectively as a group, just stuck on the horrible thing that happened to us, and how do you get past that? And a lot of us get stuck on that in our individual lives, the horrible thing that's happened to us in our lives. How do you ever absorb that? Can you? Can you move forward? Are you able to talk about this silly thing called joy when you're carrying pain? And this is another one of these areas. Like everything we talk about, of course, the answer is individual, because the questions are individual and your lives are individual. The purpose of the show and the purpose of all the programs and the purpose of everything I do in every setting, whether it's a lawyer, professor, consultant, author, is I'm trying to share the knowledge and experience I have, and I'm trying to provide maybe potentially other ways of looking at an issue in hopes of getting you to the point where you feel like you're meeting and surpassing your goals and your life is working for you. The hard part and the heavy lifting, of course, though, is up to the individual, right? All anyone can do is provide tools and information, but we all have to decide what we want. And so the question is, how am I supposed to be joyful when horrible things keep happening? I'm going to ask what I ask in almost every program at some point. What do you want? If you want to be miserable, then it is easy. It is very easy to do so. You can either be miserable just on your own personal life experience. Almost all of us have had things happen that were not awesome. Some of us have had way more of our personal share, I guess, if you were to think about it in the world, right? Some people just have had just more things happen that are all horrible, and maybe the severity has just been horrible, and they just, again, I don't talk a lot about luck because I don't typically believe in it when it comes to things like, meeting and surpassing our goals, how much income I make, what kind of life I live. All of that I don't really believe in just sitting around talking about lucky. But being aware that luck has played a role in a lot of our lives is important. So I shared earlier, I was born with a lot of, just good luck, right? I have my limbs and my heart and my lungs and my eyes and my ears, and I'm, those are things that I can't discount. On the other hand, there have been a list of things that have not been awesome, that have happened, that have just, at some points in my really most distraught moments, I get to my knees and I think, golly, how much more, It's almost biblical in some ways. How many bad things can happen to one person? And one of the things I do that I talked about in another program a while ago, which I encourage you to check out, is a program about being of service. Be of service. One of the ways that you can help get a better definition of joyful and horrible, right, is to have some sort of way to compare your experience. And I think sometimes we get caught up in our own narratives, and rightfully so. I've worked with people, and I have my own experiences where sometimes there is such a long list of horrible things. It's totally logical. It makes complete sense to just give up. To throw in the towel and say, forget joy. I don't even know if I can just get through, just each day. And I think one of the things that, at least so far, I'm here breathing right now, that helps me is, one, to remember the things that have happened that are not horrible. And I just gave some examples, right? I was born and I can breathe and I'm ambulatory, and those are things. I'm putting that on the list. I think one of the challenges that we face when we ask ourselves, what do we want? And some people say, well, I want to be happy, I want to be joyful, but look at all these horrible things, so I can't be that way, right? My argument is, you have to stop looking at your list as it is, go back and add some extra things that you take for granted to your list. And a lot of us take things for granted: the ability to touch, the ability to taste, the ability to breathe, the ability to smell. I guarantee you, there's somebody on this planet that's had it, believe it or not, worse than you have. And that's another reason why I don't encourage ignorance and ignoring what's happening in the world. Even though I get emotionally overwhelmed at times, it helps me to be grateful. You know, if I'm in the fortune that I'm able to sit somewhere and read on the internet or look at a news report and I'm not in that situation, I'm not in that refugee camp, that's another thing that's good luck and good fortune. And I'm going to add that to my list of things that, yeah, I should be joyful for. And I think part of expanding our knowledge and definition of joyful is a lot of the things that we take it granted for, that we take for granted, and then we get all caught up in these things that are, and I'm not debating that there aren't horrible things, trust me. You know, some days I have my own personal narrative of horrible things to carry, and sometimes I go to work, you know, and I'm practicing law, or I'm doing something where I'm dealing with other people's heavy issues, and it's just heavy emotionally. It's a lot to take. And the question is, what do I want? I don't want to be miserable. I don't want to be bitter. I don't want to be mired in pain and feel there's no room for me to move and I'm just stuck. I want, ideally, a shot to meet and surpass my goals. And I want whatever minute amount of contentment or peace or joy I can have in this life, I want as much of it as I can. So how you define what makes something joyful, I think, is important. I'm joyful and appreciative almost every morning. Every once in a while I don't wake up, you know, maybe I'm sick or something. But most of the time I wake up and I'm grateful. I saw the sun come up again, you know. I have something to drink and something to eat and a place to stay. I have utilities. And I put that to my joyful list. And I'm grateful and appreciative of it. And then when I look at my horrible list, I start trying to take things off that list. I can't do anything about stuff from the past. None of us can. It's done. I can try to create less new horrible things that I have a hand in. So that's where a lot of what we talk about in our programs, how you treat other people, lowering your stress, making choices that make you happy. So I'm you know, the pile is what it is in terms of what's happened, but you don't have to add more stuff to it. You don't have to go out in the world and create new misery and create new pain, because then you're just adding to the pile. Stop adding to it, all right? You know? And in theory, in a very, very simplified sense, I try to keep adding new to my joy list, right? Oh, I had a good breakfast. That's joyful. Add that. And I try to not add new stuff to my horrible list. And then ideally, over time, I'll have more stuff on my joyful list than my horrible list, or at least they'll balance out. And that gives me a shot. A shot at what? A shot at having as much time, you know, in this life as it is, and me and as the person I perceive myself to be in this, you know, human body, and let it not be horrible. And maybe that's a nice meal, or maybe that's I had a great shower, or maybe I feel like, wow, you know, I put on that lotion and I like how it smells. I smell nice. Or maybe it's I got to spend time with my, you know, my dogs, or maybe I had a wonderful chat with a friend or someone I care about. I mean, it's not anything magical. It's not like I'm going to go out and, oh, you know, this, you know, I won the lottery and, you know, I found some super amazing person who swept me off my feet and I became royalty and I live in a castle. Like, I don't know. I mean, it's not that big. It's just on a daily basis, I'm trying to keep from adding new stuff to the horrible list, and I keep adding things to the joyful list, because honestly, if you're listening to this, that you're alive, you know, you can hear it or you can read it. Those are things to be joyful for. And again, you have to stop taking these things for granted. I think a lot of people also get caught up in just envy and jealousy of other people. So people say, well, I can't forget about myself. I live in this horrible little place. Everybody else that's my age or has my job or went to my, you know, school, you know, have this and that. Well, you're not. That's not the point. And I've got so many other programs on envy and jealousy and, you know, your own self-image, and that's all just a total waste of time. You're never going to win the game of I have more than everybody. And I've talked about this in other programs. Even if you get to the pinnacle, right, you're the richest person in the world, and they have lists that come out constantly. I just read one, I think in the last 48 hours, right? Is it Bill Gates? He's been the richest person in the world. Is it Carlos Slim? Okay. Is it Warren Buffett? Who's the richest person in the world at this minute when they make the measurement? Who cares? Because you're not going to stay there forever. And if that's your obsession, you're never going to be, you can't breathe in that space because it's not secure. It's just transitory. So that's why I'm adding all these little things that I can be appreciative of. I'm breathing. I just had a nice glass of orange juice. That apple was tasty. whatever. And the fact that I was able to have that. There's a lot of people in the world right now that don't and can't. And there's been times in my life when maybe I didn't have the resources and couldn't go out and get a nice, anything. So I'm appreciative, and I keep adding that stuff to the joyful list and the horrible list. I keep trying not to add anything new to. Stuff is still going to happen because so much in life's beyond our control. But what I'm trying to do this is change how I calibrate joyful and horrible. And I keep trying to look at the joyful list and be appreciative and aware and present in the moment of when something good happens. And so many of people just rush past things in life. They're just busy, busy, busy. And they never stop to think, wow, I just had a great nap. Or what a wonderful hug I just got from a family member. And they just never stop to look at that because they're so obsessed with their horrible list or their, I got to do this or what about everybody else? And put down what everybody else, put down the whole idea of what you think everybody else is doing because it's irrelevant and you don't know. And I just argued in this episode earlier that what really happens behind closed doors with most people, it will shock you and not in a good way. It won't make you feel like, oh, now I was jealous they had a newer car than I do. If you really saw what's going on behind either the facade they put out with their personality or what they're hiding, literally behind closed doors. A lot of people are in intense amounts of pain. So this obsession with what you think somebody else is doing is a total waste of time. You need to focus on yourself, and you need to focus on what you want. If you want to be more joyful, then you have to decide. That's the first thing of everything in life. Decide. What do you want? If you want to be joyful, then be it. How do you do it is what I'm telling you, the method. You just keep adding to your joy list every day, little things. And you don't add new stuff to your horrible list. And over time, what you're trying to do is give it so that they either balance each other or at some point, hopefully, you got a little bit more on your joy list. And then when something really horrible happens, it's a horrible tornado or something completely beyond your control, then you have a little bit of emotional reserves to handle it. I also strongly suggest that you, instead of having envy for other people, which is a total waste of time, that you go out and look and see what some other people in the world are really suffering with. And it wouldn't hurt to be a little bit worldly and aware of what's happening in other parts of the world. And I think when you understand emotionally in this moment, you literally could be somewhere else. In a refugee camp or literally starving or being tortured or there's all kind of horrible things, and you're not. So you know what? Add that to your joyful list. But you have to rethink your whole perspective on this. If you don't want to be joyful, then don't. If all you can absorb is all the horrible things that happen, and you're just focused on that, and you have painted yourself into the victim role, and you want to stay there, then stay. I can't do anything, and neither can anybody else. This is our own choice. I read some pretty good science recently, and I'm going to do some shows around gratitude. I've done some other already, but about the measurable positive outcomes of gratitude, which is part of what I was saying about being aware of your situation versus other people, and the idea of choosing either happiness or joy, whatever you want to call it, but choosing to make a decision that I want to live in a less miserable state as much as I can. That's a choice. It also requires a lot of work. You got to keep constantly focused on, okay, let me look at something else I can be appreciative of, okay, I'm grateful for that. I also strongly have advised in many other programs, you need to spend some time sitting with yourself and your own thoughts. You can call it meditation, you can call it whatever you want, but you need to go inside your own head and start seeing what kind of programming. In other words, we all have these thoughts, right? About 70,000 thoughts a day, according to some other programs I've put out based on some really good scientific data. And a lot of those are really negative. So if you're sitting around and all your thoughts telling yourself all day and all night, I'm horrible, the world is horrible, I hate everything, it's the most horrible thing ever, well then yeah, it probably is. If you change your thoughts, and this is such a cliche at this point, right? But then you're going to begin to change your return on your investment of your time. But you have to make a conscious choice. You need to keep it up. It's like another part-time job. I'm adding to my joy list. Okay. I'm not going out and creating new pain and conflict and arguments, and I'm not doing that. Nope. I'm trying to, if I can, be of service. Hi, how are you? You having an okay day? Don't add to somebody else's misery. Those little things like that seem like they're not a big deal, but they are. I really do appreciate you joining me today. You can always come to CourtneyAnderson.com for more information, and I strongly encourage you to think about what you want. If you want a little bit more joy or peace or contentment or whatever you want to call it, make that decision and make that commitment and then do it. Execute a plan. If you want to be miserable, be miserable. But if you have an option, why would you choose the one with the more negative outcome? Misery, stress, health-related challenges. Again, thank you so much for joining me. And as always, come to CourtneyAnderson.com for more information.